No meals left for coach passengers. Company policy. The flight attendant's manicured hand slammed the overhead bin shut. The metallic clang echoed through the cabin as she maintained deliberate eye contact with the man in 14B. Her shoulder lifted in an exaggerated shrug before she swept her arm dismissively toward the economy section. Darius Wellington adjusted his wrinkled khakis and glanced at his faded polo shirt. At 42, he'd learned to dress down for commercial flights. The three crew members, Jessica leading, Brad and Monica flanking, clustered near the galley, their whispered conversation punctuated by pointed glances in his direction. A passenger in 14C held up her phone, live streaming to 47 Instagram followers. She'd caught the entire exchange. Darius pulled out his phone, speed dialed. "Cancel the Johannesburg route meeting. I'll handle this personally." What happened next shocked the entire aviation industry. Jessica Patterson approached with the practiced smile flight attendants reserved for difficult passengers. Her voice shifted to the condescending tone typically used with elderly passengers or children. "Unfortunately, sir, we've run out of options for your section." She dragged out the word section while gesturing vaguely toward economy. "Maybe next time book earlier, sweetie." Behind the galley curtain, Brad mimicked Darius's slight South African accent in a stage whisper. "Yeah, maybe next time, Boet." Monica stifled a giggle, covering her mouth with her hand while her eyes danced with amusement. The passenger in 14C, Sarah Chen, a travel blogger, zoomed her phone camera closer. Her viewer count had climbed to 312. Comments flooded the screen. "This is disgusting. Sue them. Racist AF. Get his name." She whispered commentary for her followers. "They're literally serving seconds to first class while telling this gentleman no food exists." In seat 8A, a white businessman in an expensive suit raised his hand. "Excuse me, this chicken portion seems small." Jessica hurried over with an apologetic smile. "Of course, Mr. Davidson. Let me get you another entree from first class. We always have extras for our valued customers." She returned moments later with a premium meal, complete with real silverware and cloth napkin. Darius watched the exchange quietly. His phone buzzed twice. First message: "Sir, your jet is ready for immediate departure. Shall we redirect?" Second notification: "Board meeting moved to your schedule. Confirmed." He typed back: "Negative. Proceeding as planned." Jessica returned to his row, positioning herself in the aisle with hands planted firmly on her hips. The stance blocked any potential movement toward the lavatory or galley. Her voice carried now, designed for other passengers to hear. "Sir, I understand you're disappointed, but we have policies for a reason. Coach passengers receive coach service. It's about managing expectations appropriately." Brad crossed his arms and positioned himself as a second barrier, creating a wall of authority. Both attendants exchanged knowing smirks, the kind service workers shared when dealing with entitled customers who didn't understand their place. Monica joined the formation, completing their triangle of judgment. She rolled her eyes dramatically when Darius asked if any snacks might be available as an alternative. "Snacks are for purchase only," Monica said, though she'd given free cookies to 3 other passengers in the past hour. The mother in 16B covered her 7-year-old daughter's ears as Jessica's voice rose during her lecture about appropriate expectations for budget travelers. The child stared wide-eyed at the confrontation, sensing the adult tension without understanding its source. An elderly gentleman in 12A, veteran of the civil rights movement, recognized the familiar pattern. He quietly unwrapped his own meal and stood to offer it to Darius. "Son, please take this. I'm not very hungry." Jessica immediately intervened. "Sir, passengers cannot share meals. Health regulations." She guided the elderly man back to his seat with firm pressure on his shoulder. The businessman, Mr. Davidson, looked up from his second helping and frowned. Something about the man in 14B seemed familiar, but he couldn't place it. There was something in the way Darius carried himself, a quiet confidence that seemed incongruous with his humble appearance. Sarah Chen's live stream had reached 892 viewers. She adjusted her angle to capture Jessica's increasingly theatrical gestures. The flight attendant's voice had taken on the exaggerated cadence of someone performing for an audience, each word carefully enunciated to emphasize her authority. "Perhaps next time you could consider upgrading if meal service is important to you," Jessica suggested with false sweetness. "Though I understand that might be outside your budget range." Brad snorted softly. Monica examined her nails with studied indifference. Darius received another text. This one made him pause. "Wellington Holdings stock up 2.3% on Ethiopian Airlines acquisition news. Congratulations, sir." He glanced at the airline safety card in his seat pocket, printed in small text at the bottom. "Aircraft operated under Wellington Aviation Holdings subsidiary license." The irony wasn't lost on him. Jessica continued her performance, apparently energized by the growing audience of onlooking passengers. Several had begun recording on their phones after witnessing the elderly gentleman's rebuffed offer of kindness. "Company policy exists to ensure fairness for all passengers," she announced loudly enough for nearby rows to hear. "We can't make exceptions just because someone feels entitled to special treatment." The word "entitled" hung in the air like a challenge. A businessman in 11C muttered to his seatmate, "This is exactly why I usually fly private." His companion nodded, both men stealing glances at Darius while shaking their heads in sympathy mixed with social distance. Sarah Chen whispered to her livestream audience, "The way they're treating this passenger is absolutely unacceptable. This is 2025, people. This kind of discrimination should be extinct." Her viewer count had reached 1,247. The hashtag #HungryPassenger was beginning to trend, though still in its early stages. Jessica seemed to interpret the growing attention as validation of her authority. She puffed up slightly, like a bird displaying dominance. "Sir, if you continue to disrupt other passengers with unreasonable demands, we'll have to document this incident for future flights." She pulled out her tablet with flourish. "I'm sure you wouldn't want to be flagged in the system." The threat was clear, delivered with the confidence of someone who believed they held all the power in this situation. Darius remained calm, his hands folded in his lap. But something shifted in his posture, barely perceptible to most observers, but Sarah Chen caught it on camera. It was the subtle straightening of a man who had made a decision. He looked at his phone one more time. The Wellington Holdings stock ticker showed continued gains. The Ethiopian Airlines acquisition had been his personal project for 18 months. These people had no idea who they were humiliating. The cabin door to the flight deck opened, and head purser Sarah Martinez emerged. Her silver wings gleamed against her Navy uniform as she surveyed the scene with practiced authority. At 53, she'd handled thousands of passenger disputes across 3 decades of flying. Several passengers had pressed their call buttons during Jessica's performance. The subtle chimes created a symphony of complaint that couldn't be ignored. Sarah approached with measured steps, her expression already set in Jessica's favor before hearing any details. This was crew solidarity, an unwritten rule of commercial aviation. "Is there a problem here?" Sarah's voice carried the weight of management, designed to remind everyone who controlled this aluminum tube at 37,000 feet. Jessica immediately shifted into victim mode. "This passenger is being unreasonable about our meal service policies. He's demanding special treatment and disrupting other customers." "Our crew follows strict protocols," Sarah declared, addressing Darius directly. "We cannot make exceptions that compromise safety or fairness to other passengers." The elderly gentleman in 12A raised his hand tentatively. "Ma'am, I witnessed the entire interaction. The young man hasn't raised his voice once. He simply asked about meal options." Sarah's smile remained professional but cold. "Sir, I appreciate your concern, but crew members are trained to assess passenger behavior patterns. Sometimes disruption isn't about volume. In 16B, the mother whispered to her husband,
"This is getting ugly. Should we record this too?"
Her husband glanced around the cabin. Nearly a dozen phones were now pointed toward the confrontation. Half the plane already is. Sarah Chen's Instagram Live had reached 2,847 viewers. Her comment section exploded with outrage. Call the airline customer service now. This is discrimination period. What flight number? We need to blast this. Someone find this man's name. He deserves an apology. On Twitter, #HungryPassenger was gaining momentum. The original clip had been shared 847 times in 23 minutes. Aviation industry insiders began joining the conversation, sharing their own experiences with discriminatory treatment. Aviation lawyer posted, "This appears to violate DOT regulations regarding equal service provision, documenting for potential federal complaint. At flight attendant." Life responded, "Context matters. Crew safety protocols exist for good reasons. Don't judge based on edited clips." Back in the cabin, Sarah made her power play. "Sir, your behavior is concerning multiple passengers. If you cannot accept our service limitations calmly, we'll need to consider whether you're suitable for the remainder of this flight." The threat hung heavy in the recycled air. Removal from aircraft at altitude meant emergency landing, FBI involvement, lifetime flight bans. It was the nuclear option, and Sarah wielded it with confidence. Darius finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I see. And what specifically constitutes unsuitable behavior?" "Excessive demands on crew time, disruption of service flow, creating passenger anxiety." Sarah rattled off the standard justifications. "We have 200 other customers to consider." Monica stepped closer, emboldened by management support. "Plus, you keep getting messages on your phone. That's also disruptive." Brad nodded vigorously. "Yeah, like who's so important they need constant contact during flight?" The question carried layers of assumption. Coach passengers shouldn't have urgent business. They shouldn't have people waiting for their decisions. They should accept their station quietly and gratefully. Sarah Chen captured every word on live stream. Her viewer count hit 3,200. The comments section moved too fast to read, but the sentiment was clear. Outrage building toward explosive levels. A passenger in 9D, corporate lawyer for a major airline, leaned forward in recognition. Something about the man's calm demeanor during escalating hostility seemed familiar. She'd seen that quality before in high-stakes negotiations. It was the stillness of someone who knew they held winning cards. Sarah Martinez pulled out her tablet and began typing. "I'm documenting this incident for our security database. Passenger in 14B demonstrating concerning behavioral patterns." "What patterns?" asked the elderly gentleman, unable to stay quiet. "Unrealistic service expectations, failure to accept crew authority, potential pre-flight intoxication assessment needed," Sarah listed while typing. The last accusation drew gasps from nearby passengers. Darius hadn't consumed anything alcoholic. The crew had refused him any food or beverage service. Jessica sensed momentum shifting in their favor. "We also noticed irregular phone usage, suggesting possible coordination with external parties." Translation: "A black man making phone calls must be suspicious." Mr. Davidson from 8A finally placed where he'd seen the passenger before. His face went pale as memory clicked into focus, but he remained silent, uncertain whether intervention would help or harm. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Cabin crew, please report passenger status for approach preparation." Sarah keyed her radio. "Captain, we have a documented disruptive passenger in 14B, requesting ground security meet aircraft upon arrival." The words ground security sent a chill through the cabin. Other passengers began exchanging worried glances. Several pulled out phones to text family members about potential delays. Sarah Chen whispered to her live stream, "They're calling security on this passenger who literally just asked for food. This is insane." Her viewer count reached 4,100. The hashtag hungry passenger was now trending nationally, with aviation journalists and civil rights activists joining the conversation. At Transportation Today posted, investigating reports of discrimination incident on flight number, seeking passenger statements for breaking news coverage. At Aclu Travel shared, this live stream appears to document clear discriminatory treatment. Passengers have rights regardless of ticket class. Back in the cabin, Darius received another text message. This one made him close his eyes briefly, as if steeling himself for an unpleasant but necessary task. The message read, "Sir, emergency board resolution drafted per your earlier request. Awaiting your authorization to proceed." He typed back, "Authorized. Execute immediately." Within seconds, every crew member's company phone buzzed simultaneously with a priority notification. The synchronized sound drew confused looks between Jessica, Sarah, Brad, and Monica. Sarah glanced at her device first. Her expression shifted from confidence to confusion to something approaching fear. The notification read, "Urgent. Chairman Wellington conducting immediate operational assessment aboard Flight 847. All crew comply fully with emergency protocols. No exceptions." Jessica's tablet slipped slightly in her hands. "Chairman Wellington? Who's Chairman Wellington?" Brad pulled out his phone with shaking fingers. Monica stepped backward toward the galley, suddenly wanting distance from the confrontation. Sarah Martinez stared at her screen, then at Darius, then back at her screen. The color drained from her face as puzzle pieces began arranging themselves into an impossible picture. Mr. Davidson in 8A finally found his voice. "Oh my God," he whispered to his seatmate. "I know who that is." But he still said nothing aloud. The cabin fell silent except for the steady hum of engines and the occasional ping of passenger phones receiving news updates about the trending discrimination incident. Darius remained seated, hands folded, waiting. Sarah Chen's live stream viewer count hit 5,650. The entire internet was watching now, waiting to see what would happen next. In the galley, Jessica frantically whispered to Monica, "What's a Chairman Wellington? Is that someone from corporate?" Monica shrugged helplessly. Neither of them had ever heard the name before. But Sarah Martinez had. And as the pieces fell into place, she realized they had made a mistake so catastrophic it would end careers and possibly destroy lives. The man in 14B wasn't just any passenger. The man in 14B wasn't just any passenger. He was the owner. Darius Wellington slowly reached into his carry-on bag and withdrew a leather portfolio. His movements were deliberate, unhurried, the actions of a man who had all the time in the world because time itself bent to his schedule. He opened the portfolio and extracted a single document. The letterhead was embossed in gold. Wellington Aviation Holdings, Office of the Chairman. "Ms. Martinez," he said quietly, his voice carrying the authority that money and power naturally conferred. "I believe we need to discuss your crew's performance today." Sarah Martinez's tablet clattered to the floor. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent cabin like a gunshot. Jessica's face had gone from flushed with righteous authority to ashen with dawning horror. "Wellington Aviation Holdings," she whispered. That's our parent company." "Among other things," Darius confirmed. He opened his phone and navigated to an app that Jessica, Brad, and Monica had never seen before, the chairman's override access portal that existed on company devices but remained hidden unless activated by biometric authorization. The screen illuminated with his thumbprint. Executive dashboard, real-time flight operations, revenue streams, personnel files. "Let's see," he murmured, scrolling through options. "Employee status check." He looked up at Jessica. "What's your employee identification number, Ms. Patterson?" Jessica's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. She looked to Sarah for help, but the head purser had backed against the bulkhead, her face a mask of professional terror. "I can find it myself," Darius continued conversationally. He typed Jessica Patterson into the search field. Her employment record populated instantly. Patterson, Jessica Marie. Employee ID, WA47291. Hire date, March 15, 2023. Status, probationary, final warning active. Supervisor notes. Previous incidents involving passenger discrimination complaints. Next review, pending. He turned the screen toward her. Interesting reading. The elderly gentleman in 12A leaned forward, finally understanding the seismic shift occurring. "Young man, are you saying you own this airline?" "Not exactly," Darius replied. "Wellington Aviation Holdings is a subsidiary management company. We operate 17 regional carriers under federal aviation licensing agreements. This particular aircraft," he glanced at the safety card, "is leased through our Ethiopian Airlines partnership program." Sarah Chen's live stream had exploded to 8,300 viewers. Comments flooded faster than her phone could display them. "Holy shit, he owns the airline. Plot twist of the century. These flight attendants are so fired. This is better than Netflix." Mr. Davidson finally spoke up from 8A. "I knew I recognized you. You were featured in Forbes last month. The Ethiopian Airlines acquisition deal, that was you?" "Guilty as charged," Darius confirmed, "though I prefer to keep a low profile when I travel commercial. It helps me assess our actual service quality versus what gets reported to headquarters." He stood slowly, and somehow the act transformed the entire dynamic of the cabin. This wasn't a passenger rising from his seat. This was an executive taking control of his boardroom. "Ms. Martinez, would you mind explaining to me why my meal service policies are being selectively enforced based on passenger appearance?" Sarah Martinez's voice came out as a croak. "Sir, we didn't know." "You didn't know what? That discrimination is prohibited regardless of a passenger's identity?" His tone remained calm, but each word carried the weight of authority earned through building a billion-dollar aviation empire. "Are you suggesting your behavior would have been different if you'd recognized me?" The question hung in the air like a judicial trap. Any answer Sarah gave would be an admission of guilt. Brad had gone completely silent, shrinking back toward the galley as if he could disappear into the aircraft's structure. Monica stared at her shoes. Her earlier confidence evaporated entirely. Darius pulled up another screen on his phone. "Let me show you something interesting." The display showed real-time social media monitoring, a dashboard that tracked mentions of Wellington Aviation Holdings across all platforms. In the past 47 minutes, we've had 12,847 negative mentions across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Our stock price has dropped 1.8%. That represents approximately $23.7 million in shareholder value lost due to this single incident. He scrolled to another section. We also have 2,394 people who have viewed this live stream and are now demanding refunds for future bookings. Conservative estimate, $847,000 in direct revenue impact. Sarah Chen whispered to her audience, "He's got a real-time dashboard tracking the damage from their discrimination. This is incredible." Jessica finally found her voice. "Mr. Wellington, sir, I'm so sorry. If I had known who you were—" "Stop!" The single word cut through her apology like a blade. "The problem, Ms. Patterson, isn't that you didn't know who I am. The problem is that you thought it was acceptable to treat any passenger this way." He opened his contact list and placed a call. The phone rang twice before a crisp voice answered, "Wellington Holdings Executive Office. This is Darius. I need an emergency board resolution implemented immediately. Flight 847, crew performance review, federal discrimination protocols." "Yes, sir. Shall I conference in legal and HR?" "Affirmative. Also contact our Ethiopian Airlines partners. They need to be briefed on this incident before it reaches international media." The call ended. Within 30 seconds, every crew member's phone buzzed again with a second priority notification. Urgent update. Federal discrimination review initiated. All involved personnel report to passenger relations upon landing. Legal counsel assigned. Cooperation mandatory. The notification also contained something that made Sarah Martinez's blood run cold. A direct quote from Federal Aviation Regulations. Title 14, CFR Part 250.9. Air carriers shall not discriminate against any passenger in the provision of services based on race, national origin, or economic status. Violations subject to federal penalties up to $27,500 per incident, plus potential criminal charges. Monica whispered, $27,000? Per incident, Darius corrected gently. I count at least 4 separate discriminatory acts in the past hour. Denial of equal meal service, preferential treatment based on appearance, intimidation tactics, and false accusations of intoxication. He did quick mental math. That's $110,000 in federal fines, per crew member involved. The number hit them like physical blows. Jessica actually grabbed the seat back for support, but Darius wasn't finished. Ms. Martinez, as head purser, you're also subject to supervisory liability under federal aviation employment law. That's an additional penalty tier. He pulled up one more screen, his personal net worth portfolio, updated in real time. The number displayed was $8.4 billion. I built this company because I believe aviation should connect people regardless of their background. Every discrimination incident undermines that mission and costs both money and human dignity. The elderly gentleman in 12A began to clap slowly. Others joined in, a spontaneous ovation that rippled through the cabin. Even some first-class passengers who had been pretending not to watch were now leaning out to see what was happening. Sarah Chen's viewer count hit 12,400. The hashtag hungry passenger was now trending globally, with major news outlets starting to pick up the story. CNN tweeted, "Breaking. Airline CEO experiences discrimination while flying coach on his own aircraft. Crew reportedly unaware of passenger's identity. Story developing." At BBC Breaking posted, Wellington Aviation Holdings chairman discriminated against by own employees during commercial flight. Federal investigation likely. Mr. Davidson stood up from 8A. Mr. Wellington, I'm James Davidson, corporate counsel for Delta Airlines. What I witnessed today was inexcusable. If you need independent verification for any legal proceedings, I'm happy to provide testimony. Thank you, Mr. Davidson. That's very kind. The businessman paused. Can I ask, do you always fly coach on your own planes? About once a quarter, Darius replied. It's the only way to see what actually happens versus what gets reported in executive summaries. Jessica had begun to cry quietly. The weight of her actions was settling in, not just the immediate job loss, but the federal penalties, the industry blacklisting, the permanent stain on her aviation career.
Mr. Wellington,
she managed through tears.
Is there any way to...
To what, Ms. Patterson? To fix this? Darius looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something new, not anger, but profound disappointment. The question isn't whether this can be fixed. The question is whether you understand why it needs to be. He turned to address the entire cabin, his voice carrying to every passenger. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize that your flight today included this unnecessary drama. This incident will be thoroughly investigated, and changes will be implemented to ensure it never happens again. The applause was thunderous this time, sustained, heartfelt recognition of both his dignity under pressure and his commitment to justice. Sarah Chen ended her live stream with a simple statement. Sometimes the most ordinary-looking person carries extraordinary power, and sometimes justice comes in the quietest voices. But the story was far from over. The real reckoning was about to begin. The aircraft's cabin had transformed into an impromptu corporate tribunal. Darius Wellington stood in the aisle, no longer a humble passenger but the ultimate authority over every person wearing wings on their uniform. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Ethiopian Airlines, CEO Direct Line. "Excuse me," he said to the cabin, then answered. "Darius speaking." "Mr. Wellington, this is Mesfin Tasso. We're seeing social media reports about an incident on one of our partnership flights. Should we be concerned?" Darius glanced at the crew members, who were now huddled together like defendants awaiting sentencing. "I'm handling it personally, Mesfin. Full briefing within the hour. The partnership is secure, but we need immediate policy updates." "Understood. Whatever support you need." He ended the call and opened his laptop, a thin device that had materialized from his carry-on bag along with what was clearly a mobile office setup designed for exactly these situations. The screen displayed the Wellington Holdings executive dashboard. Live metrics scrolled past: fleet utilization rates, passenger satisfaction scores, revenue per flight hour, and most importantly, federal compliance ratings. "Ms. Martinez," he began, his voice carrying the measured authority of a man accustomed to boardroom decisions affecting thousands of jobs. "Let's review your crew's performance against company standards." Sarah Martinez stood frozen, her career flashing before her eyes. 28 years of aviation service, an impeccable record before today, pension benefits that would never materialize if this went wrong. Darius pulled up the relevant documentation. Wellington Aviation Holdings Employee Handbook, Section 4.7, Customer Service Standards. All passengers, regardless of ticket class, race, or economic status, shall receive respectful and equitable treatment. He scrolled down. Section 4.8, Discrimination Policy. Zero tolerance for differential treatment based on protected characteristics. First violation results in immediate termination. Jessica Patterson collapsed into an empty seat, her legs unable to support her anymore. "Please," she whispered. "I have 3 kids. My husband lost his job last month. We can't afford for me to lose this position." Darius looked at her without immediate response. Around the cabin, passengers watched this human drama unfold, a woman's livelihood hanging in the balance of corporate justice. "Ms. Patterson, your personal circumstances are sympathetic. But explain to me how your financial stress justifies denying meal service to a paying passenger based on his appearance." She had no answer because there was no answer. Brad Wilson finally spoke up, his voice barely audible. "Sir, we thought..." "He looked like..." "Like what, Mr. Wilson?" The question hung in the air like a judicial challenge. Any response would be an admission of racial profiling. "Like someone who didn't belong in first class," Brad finished lamely. "Mr. Wilson, this passenger wasn't in first class. He was in seat 14B coach section, which he paid for legitimately. Your comment suggests you believe certain passengers don't deserve equal treatment even in the section they've purchased." Darius opened another screen, the flight manifest with passenger purchase records. "This passenger's ticket was purchased 18 months ago through our corporate travel program. Full fare, no discounts. Revenue to Wellington Holdings, $1,247. He looked up at Brad. "Your annual salary is $47,000. This single ticket purchase represents 2.6% of your yearly compensation, yet you felt entitled to discriminate against the customer providing your paycheck." The mathematical precision of the humiliation was devastating. Monica Chen, no relation to the live streaming passenger, had remained silent throughout the confrontation. Now she found herself under direct scrutiny. "Ms. Chen, you participated in mocking this passenger's accent. Can you explain how that behavior aligns with our international partnership requirements?" Monica's voice came out as a whisper. "I didn't mean anything by it. Wellington Holdings operates in 47 countries. We employ staff from 6 continents. Our Ethiopian Airlines partnership specifically requires cultural sensitivity training for all crew members." He pulled up her training records. "You completed that training 6 months ago with a score of 94%. Did you forget the content or did you choose to ignore it?" The precision of his documentation was surgical, Every crew member's file, every training record, every policy violation, all cataloged and cross-referenced in real time. Sarah Chen's new live stream had reached 15,200 viewers. Major news outlets were now covering the story live at CNN. Breaking, Wellington Aviation CEO conducting real-time corporate discipline at 37,000 feet. Unprecedented executive action caught on passenger live stream. At WSJ Breaking, aviation discrimination incident escalates as airline owner confronts discriminatory crew, stock implications developing. Darius opened his contacts again and placed a conference call. Legal Department, please connect me with Federal Aviation Administration Liaison and Department of Transportation Discrimination Division. The call connected immediately. Mr. Wellington, this is Patricia Hendricks, FAA Legal Counsel. We're aware of the developing situation. Patricia, I need formal investigation protocols initiated immediately. Full crew interviews, passenger testimony collection, social media evidence preservation. Already in progress, sir. DOT has assigned a dedicated team. We'll need your cooperation for witness statements. You'll have full company cooperation. I also want immediate review of our training protocols industry-wide. Jessica Patterson was crying openly now. Mr. Wellington, please. I know I made a mistake. A horrible mistake. But I can learn from this. I can do better. Darius ended his call and looked at her with something approaching compassion. Ms. Patterson, the question isn't whether you can learn. The question is why this lesson had to come at the expense of another human being's dignity. He pulled up the employment termination protocols on his screen. Federal aviation law requires immediate suspension pending investigation for discrimination incidents. Company policy mandates termination for confirmed violations. However, he continued, and the word carried enough weight to stop Jessica's sobbing, Wellington Holdings also believes in rehabilitation over pure punishment. He opened a new document, something none of them expected. Alternative resolution protocols. Ms. Patterson, you have a choice. The cabin fell silent except for the steady drone of engines. Option 1. Standard termination procedures. Loss of employment, forfeiture of benefits, industry blacklisting, federal penalties of $110,000. Jessica's face went white. Option 2. Immediate demotion to probationary status, 6 months unpaid suspension, mandatory bias training, public apology, and community service with civil rights organizations. Federal penalties reduced to $27,500 through cooperation agreement. Mr. Wilson and Ms. Chen, you face similar choices. Brad Wilson's head shot up. You mean we don't have to lose our jobs? That depends on your willingness to accept responsibility and demonstrate genuine change. Sarah Martinez, who had been expecting the harshest consequences as supervisor, was stunned when Darius addressed her separately. Ms. Martinez, as head purser, you bear additional responsibility. However, your 28-year service record shows this as an aberration, not a pattern. Supervisory retraining, formal reprimand, and oversight responsibilities for the rehabilitation program. The relief in the cabin was palpable. 3 careers saved, though forever changed. But understand this, Darius continued, his voice regaining its edge. This is your single opportunity for redemption. Any future incidents will result in immediate termination and full legal prosecution. He stood and addressed the entire cabin one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, you've witnessed something today that I hope never happens again on any Wellington Holdings aircraft. But you've also seen that when discrimination occurs, it will be addressed swiftly and thoroughly. The passenger applause was sustained and heartfelt. Sarah Chen ended her second live stream with a simple statement. Justice doesn't always require destruction. Sometimes it requires reconstruction. But the most important changes were yet to come. The story that began with a denied meal was about to reshape an entire industry. 3 weeks after Flight 847 landed, the aviation industry was still reeling from what insiders called the Wellington incident. But the real story wasn't the viral videos or the federal investigations. It was the systematic transformation that followed. Darius Wellington stood in the executive boardroom of Wellington Holdings, addressing representatives from 47 partner airlines. The room hummed with quiet tension as CEOs, operations directors, and diversity officers waited to hear how discrimination protocols would fundamentally change. "The Dignity Protocol," Darius announced, gesturing to the presentation screen, "will be implemented across all Wellington Holdings operations within 60 days. The protocol was comprehensive. Every passenger interaction would be monitored through AI-powered sentiment analysis integrated into existing cabin surveillance systems. Crew members would wear discrete audio monitors that flagged discriminatory language patterns in real time. Phase 1. Prevention, he continued. All crew members receive monthly bias training with scenario-based testing. Failure to maintain certification results in immediate grounding. Patricia Hendricks from the FAA nodded approvingly from the back of the room. The federal government was watching this initiative as a potential industry standard. Phase 2. Real-time accountability. Darius clicked to the next slide. The WellCare app. The application was elegant in its simplicity. Passengers could report discriminatory treatment instantly through a QR code printed on every seat card. Reports triggered immediate supervisor notification and required resolution within 15 minutes. Anonymous feedback protects passengers from retaliation while creating accountability chains that reach executive leadership, explained Dr. Sarah Williams, the diversity consultant Wellington Holdings had hired to design the system. The app had already processed 1,247 reports during its beta testing phase. Of those, 847 were resolved through immediate crew intervention, 312 required supervisor involvement, and 88 triggered formal investigations. Phase 3, Systemic Monitoring. The final slide showed a dashboard that would have impressed Pentagon analysts. Every flight was tracked for service equality metrics, meal distribution patterns, response times to passenger requests, even crew body language as analyzed by behavioral recognition software. Ethiopian Airlines CEO Mesfin Tasso raised his hand. What about crew privacy concerns? This level of monitoring could create hostile work environments. Valid concern, Darius replied. That's why implementation includes crew advocacy protocols. Union representatives helped design the monitoring systems to focus on behavior patterns, not individual micromanagement. The data was already proving the program's effectiveness. In the 3 weeks since implementation began, passenger complaints had dropped 73% across Wellington Holdings' fleet. More importantly, crew job satisfaction had increased as discriminatory passengers were also held accountable for inappropriate behavior towards staff. Jessica Patterson had become an unexpected advocate for the changes. Her 6-month suspension included mandatory community service with the NAACP's Travel Equality Initiative, where she helped train other aviation workers to recognize unconscious bias. I thought I wasn't racist, she told a training session of 200 flight attendants, but my actions that day proved I had internalized assumptions about who belonged in certain spaces. The training didn't just save my job. It saved me from becoming someone I didn't want to be. Her testimony, recorded with permission, became part of the mandatory training curriculum. Brad Wilson and Monica Chen had taken different paths through their rehabilitation. Brad transferred to ground crew operations, where his interactions with passengers were limited, but his mechanical skills proved valuable. Monica enrolled in cultural sensitivity certification programs and was studying Mandarin to better serve Wellington Holdings' growing Asian passenger base. Sarah Martinez had been promoted rather than demoted. Her 28 years of experience made her invaluable in implementing the new protocols. She now oversaw bias prevention training for the entire Wellington Holdings network. Experience taught me that good people can make terrible mistakes when systems fail them, she explained to a conference of aviation executives. Our job is to build systems that bring out the best in everyone. The financial impact had exceeded all projections. Wellington Holdings' stock price had recovered within a week and was now trading at all-time highs. The company's commitment to equality had attracted new corporate clients who specifically requested Wellington carriers for their business travel. More significantly, other airlines were adopting similar protocols. United Airlines announced their Respect in the Skies initiative. Delta implemented real-time discrimination reporting. American Airlines hired Wellington Holdings consulting firm to design their own bias prevention systems. The Federal Aviation Administration was considering making bias training mandatory for all U.S. aviation workers, a regulation that would affect over 750,000 employees across the industry. Williams presented the most compelling statistic to the boardroom. Industries that proactively address discrimination see average revenue increases of 12% within 2 years. We're already tracking ahead of that projection. But the real measure of success wasn't financial. It was human. Passenger satisfaction scores had reached historic highs. Crew retention rates improved as workers felt supported by clear policies and fair enforcement. The aviation industry was becoming a model for other sectors grappling with discrimination issues. 6 months ago, we had a crisis. Darius concluded his presentation. Today, we have a movement. The transformation was complete, but the story was just beginning. 6 months later, Darius Wellington sat in seat 14B on Flight 847. The same route, the same aircraft, the same humble attire. This time, however, his experience couldn't have been more different. "Welcome aboard, sir," the flight attendant said warmly. "I'm Jessica, and I'll be taking care of you today. Can I start you with something to drink?" It was Jessica Patterson. She had completed her rehabilitation program and requested assignment to this specific flight. Her supervisor had approved the request after reviewing her transformation metrics: perfect bias training scores, glowing passenger feedback, and peer recognition for mentoring newer crew members. "Just water, please," Darius replied, studying her carefully. "Of course. And sir?" Jessica paused. "Thank you." She didn't elaborate, but they both understood. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the worst moments. The flight proceeded flawlessly. Every passenger received equal attention regardless of their seat assignment. The new protocols had become second nature, creating an atmosphere of genuine hospitality that passengers could feel. Sarah Chen, the travel blogger who had live-streamed the original incident, was aboard as well, documenting the follow-up story. Her initial video had been viewed 2.3 million times, but her subsequent coverage of Wellington Holdings' transformation had reached even larger audiences. Real-life stories like this prove that change is possible, she told her 47,000 followers during a brief live stream. Sometimes black stories, touching stories of discrimination, lead to the most meaningful reforms. The passenger in 12A, the same elderly civil rights veteran, recognized Darius and smiled knowingly. He had become an informal advisor to Wellington Holdings' diversity initiatives, sharing decades of experience fighting discrimination in various industries. During the flight, Darius received updates on his phone about the program's expanding impact. The Dignity Protocol had been adopted by airlines in 14 countries. The European Union was considering similar regulations for all transportation services. Life stories of transformation were being shared across social media, inspiring other industries to examine their own bias patterns. A notification popped up. Real-life stories trending. #Dignity. In the Skies reaches 10 million interactions globally. The hashtag had evolved beyond aviation. Hotel chains, retail companies, and healthcare systems were implementing similar bias prevention protocols. What began as a single incident of discrimination had sparked a movement towards systematic equality across service industries. As the flight prepared for landing, Darius reflected on the journey from humiliation to transformation. The denied meal had cost him nothing but pride. The response had cost significant time and resources, but the outcome had created value that couldn't be measured in dollars, human dignity restored and protected for millions of future travelers. The aircraft touched down smoothly. As passengers deplaned, many thanked the crew personally, a small gesture that reflected the cultural shift the new protocols had created. Jessica Patterson was the last crew member Darius encountered as he left the aircraft.
Sir,
She said quietly,
I hope you'll consider flying with us again.
I wouldn't dream of flying anywhere else, he replied. Real-life stories of injustice can end in many ways. This one ended with hope. Have you witnessed discrimination during travel or in service industries? Share your touching stories in the comments below. Your experience might inspire the next wave of meaningful change. Hit that subscribe button for more real-life stories of quiet power defeating loud prejudice. Ring the notification bell, because justice should never fly under the radar. Together, we can ensure dignity at every altitude.